Hi guys, welcome to another lesson by Pieandbelle Art Classes. This week we're looking at skin tone as requested by one of the members of my class. If you'd like to come to one of our Leighton Buzzard or Dunstable classes, please do look in my bio for my email and my telephone number. Thank you. Right, so once we've drawn out our picture, what we're going to do is make up a basic skin tone out of yellow ochre, pink and turquoise, and then we are going to just have some other colours there that we're going to touch in for our first layer. So what I'm going to do here is add these colours. Well, I'm adding water to all the gel colours, and then I'm actually going to make my peach colour in that little circle tray, which is going to be with pink and yellow ochre and a little bit of blue just to dirty it up. I'm going to apply water to my entire body because there's no white parts on her. She's just entirely a pale peach over her whole body as the lightest tone. I'm going to put that colour in the entire of her body. So I am doing a picture where I only do kind of half of her face and the hands go off into kind of nothing, just because I really just wanted to give you an idea of how to get that skin tone in. And what I'm going to do is everywhere I can see a little bit of interesting colour, I'm going to put it so anywhere that's dark you can put little tones of blue. Anywhere where you can see a pink tone on her, put a little pink in there, and anywhere where you can see a little yellowish tone to her skin, put a little bit of yellow in there. Now on this first layer it's really subtle and you can kind of go over it later if you don't like the effect, but I find this really gives you a good base for working colours over the top of, and it gives you a nice little pops of colour that come out once you're putting the more realistic skin tone on. Now with watercolour you can definitely have it really bright, so you can keep really bright blues and purples, and I think I do and have an amount of bright blues and purples, but it's up to you really. You take it as far as you want it. I've always been a really big fan of colour, so I definitely do keep a lot of my vibrant hues in there. However, even if you were doing a really natural skin tone, there is blues, yellows, pinks, all of those colours in the under paint anyway, so you'd need to put them in that first layer even if you were going to mix up more natural tones later on. So now what I'm going to do is divide her body up. So at the moment she's one big blob, but I can still see my pencil markings underneath, so I'm following them to divide her body into the sections. Now I'm going to just use a couple of colours to do this, just because this is my just giving myself the idea of where everything is. So I can bring more colours in later. All I want to do is divide it so that I can see where her arms are and her legs are, and I can actually have a bit more of an idea of what's going on whilst I'm going to put more colours in. So that's all I'm doing. I'm trying to follow some sort of shadow formations as well, so that I'm kind of following the dark hues. And you can see already, even just with this couple of layers going on, it really is nice to have that those colours underneath. Really works well. So I'm getting those folds in her body there, and definitely I feel like when you're doing a nude, it's definitely worth picking someone in a contorted position or someone that's got an interesting body shape. People that are kind of standing upright don't tend to have as much interest to paint. It gets a bit boring if you're just drawing someone flat. And again, same with someone too thin. I like a bit of kind of belly rolls and interesting skin textures to work with. So now I'm just going to put an idea of where her chin comes in and her mouth and nose, and that's probably as much as I'm going to kind of go up on the face of. I'm going to also put a little bit of hair in for her later. I'm just shaping her chin out there with the big brush and the little brush just to decide where everything's going. I think the face is probably the hardest thing to do when you're doing a full body, just to get it at the right angle and working so that it looks okay against the body, because it can always be a little bit tricky to kind of get that going in the same direction. So again, you can see I'm putting the line where I want the separation of the skin, and then I'm washing it out and using kitchen towel to get rid of it, so that it's not just an outline. I don't want it to be an outline, I want it to go into the rest of the picture. And I'm very kind of just using this one kind of browny tone. I am adding little bits of colour in, but you can see there I'm adding a bit of blue in, but it is quite basic at the moment. I'm really just kind of wanting to separate her body out so that I can see where her folds of body are. So I love turquoise in skin. I think it works really well in skin tone. in white skins, especially. If I was doing a more ethnic skin tone, I probably would take it a lot more purpley or orangey. But I really like just playing around with colours and putting unusual colours in. So I think the hardest part of her whole body is this weird shape that she's created on her shoulder here. She's kind of folded her chest up, and that's kind of hard to create without making it look weird. I think even at the end of this it kind of looked a little bit strange. It probably isn't the best part of the picture, but that is kind of how she had her body, so I'm just following what I see. So now what I'm doing is bringing in some of that yellow ochre, which is much warmer. I'm going to warm her up because at the moment she looks very pale and pinky. So I want to warm up that left side of her body. I can see all down the left hand side of all her body she has got a much more yellowy, warm skin tone. Now this is where, now we've got rid of that kind of blue undercolour and the pink and the yellow in the undercover colour, this is where you're going to start actually thinking, what is her skin tone? You know, are you going to bring in that warmth? What are you going to do? How are you going to create it? So at this point I'm just warming her up and adding a little pink into her face there. And then I'm going to get my mid dark tones, so I think I've used, I've browned up a little bit of the turquoise so that it kind of goes into the turquoise I've already put in there, but neutralises it a little bit, takes that kind of colour out a bit. And I'm just shaping out any of her skin with this kind of, so it's a greeny brown basically, used with that turquoise and the brown. So what I'm doing here is adding some water and trying to take off some highlights, because I feel like she had a lot lighter areas going on. So I was just, if you let the water soak into the paper for a couple of minutes, then you can kind of remove them out. So this is the point where you can actually take it further into kind of brown and natural skin tones and completely wash out some of those kind of bluish, pinkish undertones. But I am going to continue it by adding some purples, just to show you, because I feel like obviously if you just copied the last part where I was making up kind of warm skin tones and adding them on top with browny kind of elements, then you could make a pretty decent kind of natural looking skin for a body. But what I want to do is show you just how many colours you can actually get in there, and then at the end of it, it will just look completely nice and normal. It won't look weird at all. So I'm going to make up some kind of mixtures of colours, but then I'm also going to use some bright purples and little bits of other colours that are a bit more vibrant, just to show you how to place them. So obviously what you want to be doing is thinking of it as if it was a black and white picture. So when you're putting in your colours, if they're mid-tone, dark or light, it really doesn't matter what hue they are. If you're having a kind of playful picture like I am, you can play around with it and put them kind of wherever you want. So I am going to use some colours that I've mixed that are browny tone, but then I am going to come in with some brighter colours as well. And all I'm doing is kind of like a bit more of a detailed version of that second step where I was separating out her body, but now as I'm separating out her body, I'm going to be doing it with different colours. I'm going to be changing my colours up to make the picture more interesting as I'm going. As you can see, I always put the colours in and then I do wash them out, just because I don't want them to have like harsh lines anywhere. This isn't a picture which is going to have an outline. It's not an outliney drawing. It's a picture where I'm going to put the painting, I'm going to put the paint in and I'm going to wash it to make it part of a shadow or part of her body, because I don't want those harsh outlines on her. So I'm getting all those little shadows in at this point as well. And also I'm going to start kind of shaping out hands and shaping her face a little bit more. I think I do in this stage as well. So you can see how I'm using the small brush to put the paint in, and then if I need to wash it out at all, I just swap over to the large brush. So I have both of them in my hands pretty much all the time, one in my left hand and one in my right hand, and I swap them out as I'm going. So it's up to you by this stage whether you are picking natural colours or bright colours, and whether you want it to go one way or the other. It's really your own little preference. I think I didn't add a lot of vibrant-y colours into her face. I kind of kept that quite neutral because I liked the fact that it had a lot of vibrancy in the body, and then made the body the focus point of my picture. So really trying to get that kind of strange fold in. She's also got kind of a pinky element in her body there, so I think I bring some of that purpley colour in where she has those folds under her arm. I think I'm just reshaping out her arm a bit there. So this is all things that you can do, even if your picture, you've kind of tried to follow the pencil lines underneath, but you might have got a little bit lost, especially when you put colour in, because it can all seem a bit washy in one tone. And sometimes you kind of get the arm or leg placement ever so slightly wrong. This point where we're going to put these darker colours in is where you can actually start shaping things out a lot more and getting them really where you want them to be. So I'm starting to put some of those shadows in. And I'm kind of following what I'm seeing, as in if it looks warm or cool in tone, so if it's a yellowy tone or if it's a pinky tone. But also I am thinking along the lines of where I can put in interesting colours whilst I'm doing this. So I'm just making that fold of her arm and bringing in that dark element down her leg there. I don't think I even put that bit in the drawing where her leg was folded underneath, so I just started filling that out a bit. And I know a lot of people are scared to have a really kind of quite elaborate pencil drawing underneath their picture, but even with these light colours, already if I left it at this stage and didn't put a background around it, you can barely see the pencil now because I've worked so lightly with the pencil. But it was a very detailed pencil picture and I can still follow it all the way through because I can see it, but when I get to this stage I lose it a bit, but it doesn't matter because I've already filled in where all the folds and where she is, so it doesn't really matter so much. So now I use literally just two tones. I think in her hair I make up a slightly darker brown and then a really bluey brown, and I just want an idea of some of her hair there because it will help shape out where her hands are. That's literally the only reason I put a little element of her hair in, but I didn't want it to be a lot of hair. You can see I'm adding some of that bluey colour in there because I always love a bit of blue in brown hair. It's just an interesting colour you can pop in there, same as purple. And then I use my little brush just to give myself some little wisps of hair falling down over her face and neck. And it does help make that hand seem in the right place. I feel like it's quite an unusual position that she's in with her arm kind of wrapped around her neck. It's not really a natural pose, but I think that's why I chose it and that's why I liked it. Maybe you could find a pose that was a little less restrictive, but also I had to think about the guidelines of YouTube, so she does not have any rude areas showing. So if you found another picture, even if it was a bit less contorted than this, but you still want interesting shapes and folds, you don't want someone just standing bolt upright. So do consider what position your person is in. Now this wouldn't be good to do a watercolour from obviously a seated model, a life model, but what they tend to do is if you do go to a life modelling class, they will do a couple of contorted poses like this where you can get sketches down, and then they will do a more natural, comfortable pose for the person. And if you wanted a more contorted pose, you would have to take a photograph because it would be very uncomfortable for a person to sit for an entire length of time to do an entire painting if they were contorted. So you can see now I'm starting to get that purpley colour in. She definitely has quite pinky toned skin anyway, so like getting that purple in is quite nice. And again you can see how I'm swapping out the colour, putting the colour in and then swapping it out, still separating all her areas. Now this is really important because she is one colour, she is flesh all over her, but her body is separated. Now it's not separated by black lines, there's obviously very dark elements around, like in the kind of hollow of her shoulder there and in where her stomach is. It's very, very dark in those elements, but then like where her arms are separated, there isn't definite outlines to that. So you have to look at the picture closely and see what what is happening, where the light and dark sources are, so that you can separate them out. Because even if you look at that kind of part of her arm next to her breast there, it's already separated. I do think I take that a little bit darker because it's a little bit darker in the picture, but it's already separated out without a very heavy line, a heavy outline on it. And her neck to her jaw is separated out. So you don't have to put heavy darkness in. She has got very dark elements in this picture, but not all of it is separated out with big black bold lines. So you can see, especially when I'm coming into her stomach, I'm trying to add it really, really fine, and that's why my head's getting in shot, so apologies for that. But I'm trying to get those in super fine, and I tend to work on top of it when I get to this level. So if I was doing a picture like this normally without filming it, I would definitely get my whole head over the top. I'd probably even have the board upright and me looking right over the top of it, because at the start I want it flat, I want all the paint to go where the paint's going, but at this point where I'm just putting thin lines in, the paint isn't going to drip down, the paint isn't going to go into places I don't want it to go, because I'm literally putting the smallest bits of paint in, so it's not going to drip and go places I don't want it to go. So I think I've mixed some of that pink with that yellow ochre, and I'm making a more warm version of the colour that I've just been putting in. And I'm kind of fixing her shoulders and places where I can see the outline isn't very nice. I'm just going to fix them up a little bit. And it was quite nice because you can see the sun is coming in at this point, so it's quite nice working like that because it dries it a bit quicker, which means that I can get longer parts done for you guys in one bit without having to wait for it to dry. I mean, this is definitely another thing with watercolour. The temperature of your house, how much sun is on your paper, all of these things will make a huge difference to how quickly your watercolour dries and how quickly you can move on to the next stage. And obviously if you're a beginner and your stage is taking quite a long time because you want to have a bit more time to fill it all out, maybe do consider being in a cooler room or working away from direct sunlight so that you have that little extra time before your paper's dry. So I'm just darkening in areas, but you can see how slowly I'm taking it. I don't want her to be really heavy in any areas really, because I'm going to put quite a dense background in. So I'm kind of trying to keep her quite translucent and pretty so that it's a real stark contrast to the background. So I'm kind of doing little bits on her face, not much, just kind of little tiny bits. And I'm putting in ideas of her feet and hands. I'm not really filling them out entirely because that's not, I really wanted it to be like a kind of half finished type of picture anyway. Because I am someone that really does love those kind of works that kind of go off into nothing. They have kind of just areas that fade to nothing. I always think that's really beautiful. So you could have stopped at that point, but I am actually going to give her an idea of a background, and I'm going to use a dry brush technique with a flat end brush and some Chinese ink. And I'm just going to put the ink around the outside of her, and then I'm going to just spread it out until the brush is dry and gives that really nice effect. I just think it's a really interesting way of finishing this picture off, but you could have left it out and just had it without. Okay, and that is our finished picture. I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Bye!